here, but before we get into it, I will say this: let's say the question is cookies that are, just to touch on what we talked about last time before we go back to cookies that are baked in a fleshik oven. Are you fleshik? Do you have to wait 6 hours? So the answer is no, as we saw last time from the Sheva Akasi. No, for sure not. But I will say this. Then the second question, and this is always why the danger. I'm always a little nervous whenever we talk about these halachas. Obviously not in this context, but to explain it to people that don't know the halachas, it's a little bit dangerous because if you tell someone you don't have to wait 6 hours, they don't think it's bisari, and then if milchik gets mixed in, they're not too makbid. Those are two separate concepts, as we saw from Rav Kiva Eger from the Shach. It could be mamish basar, but you don't have to wait 6 hours. So the question, and we'll deal with this a little bit later in the sugya of Zayah. Let's say you have cookies that are baked in a fleshik oven, so you don't have to wait 6 hours. The question is, are you allowed to eat them with milk? So then the real question is, when are they baked? If they're baked at the same time as meat, absolutely not. No question you're not allowed to. No question you're not allowed to, because that's Zayah Mamish. And not even Zayah, that's Reicha, which Lichachila you're not supposed to. It's a Mefurish case in the Gemara. The question is, if the cookies are baked after the meat,
not a binyomo. So
no. So you take chicken right out of the oven on Friday and you put cookies in. That there's a lot more makom to be makel to eat it with milk. The reason being is because Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva. Rav Moshe Feinstein said that the whole inyan of Zayah, which we'll see again, we'll go through the tshuva maybe inside, is kedai. Okay, so let's go through it together. This is a tshuva from Rav Moshe in Siman Mem. Now this tshuva is very interesting because basically this person Chaim Shlas, who I don't know who that was, but he sent to Rav Moshe basically a couple reasons why he felt that Zayah is no longer a concern in our ovens. And each one was rejected by Rav Moshe. Now, to be fair, I went through it, I wrote about it in, I think, Volume Gimel, that each one, while this person gave it as his own reason, and Rav Moshe rejected it, each one actually is legit. I mean, there were poskim who said each one. Rav Moshe didn't like any of them, but Rav Moshe sort of put it all together. Like, he wasn't a fan of either one, but not Rav Moshe. So we'll go through it. He says like this: "B'tanure gaz shebedinazu im yesh chash zeya b'bishlu tasha shel basar megula le'eser levashal achach tasha shel chalav megula sheroitza." Right. So basically, you cooked meat in the oven, you took it out, and then you want to cook, big ziti in the oven. So the problem is the zeya, right? Again, what's the concern? The zeya goes up to the top of the oven, and then when the cheese you bake, then the zayah comes down and goes in, and it's Basar B'Chalav. So roitza kvay teras lahatim gimel taimim. So this Rav Chaim Shlas wanted to be makel for 3 reasons. Same time in Klushim, they're all weak. Rav Moshe says, I'm not a fan of any of these reasons. It's not that Rav Moshe puts it together. Rav Avadia and Rabbi Olbaum, by the way, has an incredibly similar tshuva. If you go through, very, very similar. Rav Avadia and Rabbi Olbaum, they basically take all these reasons, add a couple more, and say, listen, each one is kind of shvach, but you put like 6. You put 6 stuff together, you got something cooking, right? So he says like this. Let's go through Rav Moshe. Mashakasa b'tam aleph. The first reason is that Rav hamerchak bein hakeder la'koislim. That there's a big distance. So he says vada in lismech, meaning there's such a distance that the zayah will dissipate before it gets to the walls. Which, by the way, Rav Soloveitchik held like that. Listen, we're in a big room. This is obviously a very, very extreme example. If I spray something, will it even get to the walls? No. So his point is, our ovens are large enough that who says that the zay actually gets to the walls? So he says, "Vade in l'smachazeh." Dafim nindoy shehu namich me'agag v'rachem ha'koysim b'ovim shleya shem yatzoletz b'azeya. Right? Even if you say that by the time the zay gets to the walls, it's not yatzoledes. It won't even matter, because he says even if it's so far away that maybe it won't be hot by the time it gets to the walls, but the walls are hot, right? The walls are hot, so the walls will heat up the steam. So Moshe says, I don't understand this. And he continues a few lines later. By the time the steam gets there, it heats up. Right? One of the heterim for zayah is that what if the zayah is not hot by the time it reaches it, but the walls are hot, so it'll heat it up again. So So Rav Moshe says, I don't get what your heter is. V'loymar, and this is what Rav Soloveitchik is quoting. V'loymar shu gevayir rechaykim kol kach ad she'ein magil l'shem zeh klal. And to say that our ovens are so large that the steam won't get there, loy mistaber. I don't agree. V'loy yadu alonu midah b'zen. I also don't know. Then what's the midah of it? Like, what's the measurements? What's a big oven? What's a small oven? So that's heter number one that Rav Moshe doesn't like. Let's go to the second reason. That there's a hole in the oven, that there's steam, place for the steam to leave. But Rav Moshe doesn't like that either, because he says even if there's a place for the steam to leave, but first of all, who says it all leaves? Also, there's definitely steam that stays, so I don't like that either. Go to the next paragraph.
Like exhaust? Or something?
Yeah, he's talking about exhaust, but even that also shouldn't matter. There's definitely still steam that stays. It's not like you know that they're all the exhaust. The halacha of Zeya, and Rav Moshe points this out, Zeya is a problem even if there are no walls, right? If you have an outdoor barbecue, yeah, and you have two racks and an outdoor barbecue, no walls, just fire and two racks on top. The first rack has a steak. The rack on top of that has cheesecake. It's going to be awesome. The cheesecake is going to be a problem. There's no walls. What's the answer? Zeya goes up. Like, who cares? Like, it's not a hazard. Go to the next paragraph. Tama Gimel. Dem einoi mamish bezach hazeh yishlita shenisiyavsha v'nisr v'machmas chaymatanur. Ve'im bezerach mishum blia. Rav Moshe says that what's the third heter? That if it's zeh achar zeh, then you could assume that all the mamoshes is already dried up, and it's just blias. Rav Moshe says einoi movin. Ha'ikar hanidin hu mitzad blia. Rav Moshe says that's what zeya is. I'm not concerned. Meaning, Rav Moshe is saying, I'm not concerned that Zeya. What are you concerned about with Zeya? That it's going to be dripping into your food? If that would be the concern, then just wipe it down with a paper towel. It's not the pshat. It's that the walls are saturated with that steam. So Rav Moshe says, the mitzad ha'be'en, Rav Moshe says, if you're concerned about droplets, ha'yachayil l'salik, you could just remove it. Shif with a paper towel. And by the way, so Rav Moshe says, so first of all, you haven't helped the actual blias part, and then Rav Moshe says the second thing, who says that it goes away? Who says that it dries up? Where are you getting any of this from? So now this is the major heter though. So Rav Moshe seems to be very, very strict. But now look at the next paragraph, and these next two paragraphs are essential in Rav Moshe's, and this, by the way, this true for Rav Moshe is quoted by a lot of poskim. I know that Rabbi Forst in the Kosher Kitchen, I believe, follows this tshuva as well. V'lochein, says Rav Moshe, Im haya zeya, if there is zeya, ein lahata levashel tavsher basar v'tavsher chalav megulin, af b'zerach hazelis ma'meruba. If there is zeya, you cannot cook milk open in a fleshik oven. Not allowed to do that. But avol misupkani, but says Rav Moshe, I'm not sure about one thing. Im choshishim b'stama l'zeh. Do I have to assume there's zeya? Meaning, if I see zeya, I know there's an issue. But do I have to assume there's zeya? Now, the funny thing about this is, and I spoke to Rosh Hashiva about this once, I mean, zeya is steam, so if you want to go on a scientific level, I'm pretty sure anything that has liquid probably has steam. But Rav Moshe's point is, do I have to assume that there's a significant amount of steam? The Lashon HaRamah, because the Ramah's Lashon is Siman Kuf Ches, unless there was steam. Mashma, can you do it as a Rav Moshe says the Ramah's Lashon in hiziyah, which means you saw the zayah. Not that you could assume there's zayah. So maybe I don't have to assume of zayah. Says Rav Moshe. Avol efsher, on the other hand, tanurim elu shestum begag v'koisem vadam. On the other hand, I could assume if it's an enclosed oven, where's the zayah going? Right? So Rav Moshe says the one thing I'm not sure about is do I have to be choishish for zayah or not? To that Rav Moshe says v'lochen yesh lahachmer lamaisa shaloi levashel b'taner kaderis megulas. You should always be machmer. Ubidi eved kiven shu safik ein la'eser im hayachar meis la'es tebli henoisi tamlav gam. After 24 hours, you can be mekel b'di eved because at that point the actual mamoshes is probably batal b'shishim. All you're left is blias. All you're left is a flavor encased in the walls of the oven, and after 24 hours, it's no tamlav gam. But go to the next paragraph. So fine, Rav Moshe is pretty strict so far, yeah? V'hine, the last paragraph, Imlein is Basar B'Chalav K'deres Basar Lach. Let's say you didn't cook anything liquidy. Ela Afu, all you did is baked cookies in the oven or baked bread. Or Bishul Dvarm Yeveshim, Shem Oichem B'Loy Mashkim, which is solid foods without liquid. Issa per Prima Gadim. The Prima Gadim Shita is Hashal Initial B'Seder Sheni. Dezeas Oichlen Einoi Oiser. So the Prima Gadim has a massive heter that he feels that Zeya of Oichlin is not significant. Now, what the Prima Gadim is saying is not that there is no Zeya of Oichlin. He's saying the Zeya that comes off of food is not considered Zeya. Now, let me explain where the Prima Gadim is coming from. What is the source of Zeya? So, it's actually something that's very misleading.
Zeya of Oichlin is not Zeya, or
Correct.
Is not enough to be a problem?
It's not Zeya. It's not halachically Zeya. That's the Prima Gadim says. Now, what's the reason for this? What's the whole Indian of Zeya? Where does it come from? So it's actually very, very misleading. The Gemara talks about cooking in an oven at the same time, milchik and fleshik. And the Gemara says it's a problem because of reicha. And the Gemara has a whole discussion, is reicha milsa or is reicha lav milsa? The Gemara concludes that reicha milsa hi lichachila. But b'diavad is fine. So if you walk away from the Gemara, you will think that the only thing that exists is reicha, which is aroma. Which, by the way, is only a problem if it's cooked at the same time, and it's only a problem l'chachila. So you'll walk away from the Gemara saying that if it's not cooked at the same time, well, there's no reicha. So I could have one oven, cook steaks, open, take it out, cook baked ziti, open, take it out, and go back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. Because the Gemara makes no reference of Zeya. Where does Zeya come from? It is from the Chuvas HaRosh. It's from the Rosh in Chuvas. The Rosh in Chuvas says, I want to tell you something amazing. He says, I think his Lashon is like to his son, I want to tell you something like Davar Ikri. And that is, in addition to Reicha, there's also something called Zeya. Now what's so funny about it is that the reason why it's so misleading is the Gemara concludes that Reicha Lav Milsi, that B'diavad is fine. But says the Rosh, I actually think there's something else going on that makes it also even B'diavad. And that's Zeya. Where does he get the concept that steam is significant? It's from a Mishnah in Mikvos. The Mishnah talks about if you have a mikveh of tamei waters, and it gets very hot, and anyone that's been in a hot schwitz, the walls have moisture. The Mishnah talks about how the steam that comes off of tamei waters is tamei. So says the Rosh, you see from here that Zeyas mashkin kemashkin. That's the Rosh says. It's a pella, by the way, it's such a chiddush, because that's the makar. It's not one area of halacha brought down regarding food. It's regarding tumah tahara. Fine, shine. Says the Prima Gadim, you want to play that game, the Rambam writes that Zeyas oichlin is not oichlin when it comes to tumah tahara. So that's the Prima Gadim. Not that there is no Zeya, but Zeyas oichlin einoi ke oichlin. Because again, the source of Zeya is from the liquid of tumah tahara, not the solids of tumah tahara. Yeah? So back to Rav Moshe. Says Rav Moshe, he quotes this Prima Gadim. The Zeyas oichlin einoi oiser. And then the Prima Gadim even makes a chiddush. Ubechelev mohutich, liquidy fats, congealed fats, he looks at that as a solid. It's not considered a liquid. Which, by the way, if you go with the strict wording of the Prima Gadim, you'll basically never have a real problem because you're always cooking.
Moshe says congealed is like...
No, the Prima Gadim. Chelev mohutich.
But as soon as it gets hot, it turns to liquid.
But in the laws of tumah tahara, that's considered an oichlin, meaning in the shiurim of how much shear it needs to transmit tumah, it's oichlin, right? If someone were to touch that with a fruit were to come in contact with a chelev mohutich, it would not be b'chiyutan, right? It would not be eligible to become tameh. So says the Prima Gadim, you want to play the game of Zeya, and it's learned out from Tumah, so we're going to be very, very specific. Says Rav Moshe. By the way, that's why if you're Rav Scheinberg used to say that if you follow Rav Scheinberg Paskin like the Prima Gadim, and he said if you follow the Prima Gadim, you'll never have a problem with ovens, because unless you're boiling milk and boiling chicken soup, when are you boiling liquid? You're not.
Never.
You never.
Well, you could have it in liquid gravy and meat.
But he says that gravy is only considered bisari because it was cooked with oichlin, so it has the status of oichlin. That's the chiddush of Rav Scheinberg. But go back to here. So Rav Moshe says, Shein zi aser oiser apia Rambam hilchos tuma. Avol kosa b'loshen efsher. Now the Pri Megadim said this shita as loshen efsher. Okay. Masha shemistapik ledina v'huve pischei tshuva. Av b'yavish mamish masha shaloi mistapik klal umata bebir. But says Rav Moshe, when you have a dry item that realistically probably doesn't have zeh at all, then it's even better. So says Rav Moshe, imkain ba'afu bishul akdvar miyveshim yishlahatel l'dei b'zachar za'af b'ziyu. Even if there's zeh, if it's a dry item, you could be megal.
Not because it's no zeya, because it doesn't.
It's a combination. He says, listen, if you have a dry item that you saw steam come out of, you should be machmer. Meaning, so you, it's sort of a combination. It's the fact that it may not have had zeya, and even if it did, you have the Pri Megadim. So, therefore, like this. So Rav Forrest quotes this, and he says,
both sides has to be coming from the meat and the milk.
Correct. It has to be both sides. So go back to our discussion. I put in chicken, liquidy fatty chicken. Chicken has zeh. Zeh goes up.
And cookies.
I take it out. Not at the same time. At the same time, it's for sure a problem because it's flying around. But I take it out and I bake cookies. According to Rav Moshe, the cookies don't have zeh, which means you don't have two sides of the zeh to be an issue. So according to this sheet of Rav Moshe, if it's a cake batter, I don't know if that's considered dry. That is unclear from Rabbi Forrest, but cookies and challah, it's considered a dry item. Then it's considered as if you don't have to be chayshish for zayah. If you're not chayshish for zayah, then it's not going to be an issue. Then you would be able to eat the cookies and milk. If you hold like Rav Moshe. If you don't hold like Rav Moshe, then it's a major issue. So when it comes to practical halacha, would I tell people that they can eat it with milk? Depends who's asking. It depends, do they understand the nuances of this, and do they understand that, all that stuff. But conceptually, if someone, I'll give you an example. If someone called me up and they said they really want to serve it with milk, and I'll give them a Shabbos, okay, fine, sure. Rav Moshe finds it. That's what Moshe finds it. But that's what this background is. That's the basis of the shaila. That according to Rav Moshe, if the second item is a dry item, like a cookie or like a dough, it doesn't have zayah. If it doesn't have zayah, then you only have half of its zayah. The bread's zayah, and you need it to pull it down.
The zayah has to come from both items.
Because you need the zayah to penetrate. So when they're cooking at the same time, the zayah is just flying. But if they're not at the same time, what happens? The zayah goes up into the walls. I need the second item to go in and pull the zayah down. But if I don't have that, that's from Rav Kiva. Rav Kiva says mafurish that you need two items to be maziyah. Or it has to be cooking at the same time. These are all Siman Tzadi Beis and Siman Kuf Ches, but that's the sheet of Rav Moshe. So according to Rav Moshe, you would be allowed to eat the cookies with milk. Okay, we're up to Sif Daled, yeah? Misha Achal Gvina, this is Siman Pei Tes Sif Daled. Oh, and we got to do Siman Tzadi, by the way. I forgot about that. Kachal, it's about udders. I think we want to run through it. Maybe we'll just do it fairly quickly because it's not negea whatsoever. But okay, Misha Achal Gvina. If a person ate bread, basar. I'm sorry, Misha Achal Gvina. You eat cheese, basar. Now you want to eat meat. Sarach levar me'al shulchan shiurei pasha achal magvina. You're not allowed to eat the same sliced bread that you had on the table for dairy. You're not allowed to use it for meat. Now we'll see about this.
In the past that had to have been sliced already.
So that we'll look at it. Right, and you're not allowed to eat it on the same table cloth because schmutz. You definitely can't cut cheese with a fleshig knife because the knife might be dirty, and then you have schmutz of milk and meat together. And more than that, you shouldn't cut, if you're going to make a grilled cheese, you should not cut the bread for the grilled cheese with a fleshig knife. Again, in the times of Shulchan Aruch, they had a very hard time cleaning knives. So if you use a fleshig knife to cut bread for grilled cheese, then the concern is a schmutz of meat. You're using that meat for grilled cheese. But if you stab the ground, it's mutter. This is the concept called ni'itza bekarka. Ni'itza bekarka is very misunderstood. It even got to the point of like mainstream medium. I think they made fun of it on a certain television show that they put it you put it in a flower pot. People think that if something's treif, you put it in a flower pot. This is not marish cake. What it is, the people in Hashivin have asked me, like, why does my mother-in-law take spoons that are treif and put it in the flower pot? Marish. That doesn't help if it's treif. If it's treif, it needs to be purged. What it helps is like this. If a knife has schmutz on it, it obviously will cause problems. Now, they didn't have ways to clean knives very well. Pasha to clean the outside surface of a knife. One of the ways to do it is if you have compact ground and you stab the knife in the ground, it will scrub off the schmutz. That's purely what it was. So if you want to cut a grilled cheese,
it was a cleaning mechanism, not a kashering.
It was a cleaning mechanism. So if you want to have a grilled cheese, yeah, and the only knife you have is meat. So it's cold bread. So you say, well, what's the big deal? The problem is the knife is schmutzy. It's got meat on it. It's very hard to clean it. So stab the ground, that will clean the knife. Miunitza bekarka kosher shari. Aval kvar nogu kol yisrael yeshneim sakinim v'lishim yeshiyu heker v'nogu lishim shachalav ein lishanis minig yisrael. The minig of Klal Yisrael is to not use one knife for milk and meat, even for cold milk and meat, even by stabbing the ground. The minig of Klal Yisrael is to have separate knives and ein. Look at Rav Moshe in Siman Lamed Ches of Yeridei Chelik Aleph. So the question is like this: when the Shulchan Aruch says that you're not allowed to, if let's say you ate bread at a dairy meal, you're not allowed to use that bread for meat, and vice versa. So the question is, well, what's the definition of being at the meal? What if it's sliced? What if it's not sliced? What if it's whole? So Rav Moshe says, "B'davar misha oichel gvina v'roitz lechel basar she'isa b'yeridei shetzarich levar shira pasha ochel magvina shikshi yedidi shemasher shetzarich liyachid pas lemacholi basar levad macholi chol levad v'lo b'nizar b'zeh." Says Rav Moshe, it sounds like what you're saying is that you have to have a separate loaf from milchik and fleishik, and he's like, nobody's makbid about that. Hine isuhu rak al shiurei chaticha sapah she'achu ba hagvina. Oy af al chaticha ketana shechata kedei lo achal ima gvina. Shal zu ein nizar. So Rav Moshe says like this: the main isur is for sliced bread that you actually ate cheese with, or sliced in order to eat cheese with. The point is, Rav Moshe is saying like this: it doesn't mean, let's say you have a loaf of bread that's sitting at the table, challah, right? Challah from Shabbos. You slice one slice and you have 90% of the loaf is left. So you read the Shulchan Aruch, that was at a fleishik meal. So you read the Shulchan Aruch, that would mean you put it in the kitchen, at the end of the meal you put it in a Ziploc bag, you want the next day, you want to make it into French toast. From the Shulchan Aruch, from the Shulchan Aruch it seems to be aser. Moshe says no, that's not technically what the Shulchan Aruch is referring to. What the Shulchan Aruch is referring to a case is where you sliced bread in order to eat with cheese, and you actually took the bread and put some cheese on it, and then you took the cheese off with his remnants. Or you sliced it in order to eat, so it was sliced up on the table in order to eat with dairy dip or with dairy cheese, so people are touching it with schmutzy hands. But says Rav Moshe, you see, when you slice it in order to eat with dairy, people are not particular. People are not particular to make sure that they keep it parav, because it's like if you slice bread in order to make deli sandwiches, you put 10 pieces of bread at the Shabbos table cut up in order to make deli sandwiches. Those breads are fleishik. Why? Because people are touching them. They're cut for deli sandwiches. So no one is makbid. No one's thinking like, oh, I got to make sure to keep it parav. That's not. But it says Moshe lochein afim yoyim shaloi nagama. And therefore, even if you say, well, I didn't touch that slice, that falls into the category of things that the average person is not particular about. You're not believed to say that you were particular. But if you have a whole loaf of bread, that is not something that is particular. That's not something that's much of an issue. But he does say, where does he say this? So keep going in the tshuva. Let me just skip a little. So towards the end of the tshuva, he says, meaning you want to be machmer. So yeah, any challah that was on the table at the Friday night or Shabbos day meals, you do not want to eat with dairy. Yesh b'zeh maila, l'harchaka yisera, v'zu kavanas hagoyin. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch, the Gra says, mitzvah men amuvcha hechadach gvina v'reis l'chabas tzarich lahavim al shulchan alechem v'chol machal sham gvina al shulchan. Kavanas afla pasuk gedoyla. Ein amadin. That's not necessary, but that's a what is this lashon? It's a ma'ila gedola. That's a nice
thing. On the
thing.
table, Mamish, if we leave it on a challah board, does that change the status?
As long as people aren't, but if people are grabbing it with their dirty hands, it's the same. So if you have, let's say, challah platters, like challah plates.
So you have a plate. The way the challah board where you cut it off and you put it onto the
Correct.
challah plate.
So then on the board should be fine l'kuli alma, assuming the person who's moving it, your hands are not schmutzy. But if people are reaching for it and their hands are schmutzy, then it would be an issue. And if you have a large loaf where you could say definitively, I'm telling you, it's clean, man, like no one touched it, that Rav Moshe says there's no chiyuv, but there's a ma'ila yisera. But that, okay, fine. If you
we're talking about using it with mamish.
Yeah.
But to eat it at the same meal.
No, that would be fine.
Making French toast with
French toast. Or vice versa. You want to make a grilled cheese. Or making a deli sandwich.
The Balei Shulchan didn't agree with on that.
So they bring down on the bottom over here in Simon Peites. They bring down in the back here. I have to check. I don't see.
It was Shlita back then.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's not quoted over here, which means I must have seen it inside. So I don't have it on me. I have it at my house. I'll check it out for next time. Okay? Should we stop here? Oh.